Hello all, welcome to Up the Poshcast, the Poshcast made by the fans for the fans. Grab yourself a drink, put your feet up and listen in. And by the way, there could be some strong language.
Absolutely delighted to be joined by Philip Ideson, Bradford City fan, first and foremost, and then secondary podcast host with Hardtruth with Darragh MacAnthony. I guess, firstly, Philip, how are things with you?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me on. I feel like, I don't know if I'm cheating on the Hardtruth by coming on the pod, but it's a pleasure to be here, and it's nice to be on the other side of the mic once in a while.
Oh yeah, that's what I said, wasn't it? Is when you join in, it's like normally you're sat here and you're in the number one seat, and then Darragh sat where you are answering all your questions, isn't he? So definitely something different for you. But I mean, probably should we start with the fixtures? Obviously, Posh versus Bradford, 23rd of August, nice and early on in the season. What are your thoughts on that?
I wish it was a little bit later in the season, personally, just because I'll be in the UK in early August. And so I either wanted first day or a bit later. Whether I can get back or not, I've got to try and figure that out. But I'm actually excited for it. You know, I've said on the Hardtruth before how whenever I come to London Road, I'm just, I feel like one of the family. There's so many kind of folks that I've got to know at Posh over the years of doing the podcast, and just really just such a friendly club with everyone behind the scenes. And so to kind of be to go to the game, to be with all the folks that I know and watching City at the same time is going to be a little bit of a surreal feeling. So I hope that I can do everything I can to get back. And it's when we've been in League Two for so long, you look at the fixture list, and now the fixture list, is obviously a different fixture list than some of the not particularly attractive games that we've had over the last 6 years. Every game seems like a tough one on paper, just from where we've come from. But I think we're strengthening enough where we can hold our weight in League One. So we shouldn't be necessarily afraid, but we'll see. And I think the reverse fixture is, we were talking about Valentine's Day, isn't it?
Yeah, that's going to be a tough sell.
Nothing beats a Valentine's Day in Bradford.
Yeah, I've done Fleetwood on Valentine's Day with my partner. I'm not sure whether Bradford's going to be one, but I've never been to Bradford before, so I will be there. Whether that means that I'm single come the 15th or not is a different question, right? Who have Bradford got before they play Posh? They'll have 4 games, right?
Yeah, so trying to remember off the top of my head, we start with Wickham at home on the first day of the season.
That'll be a sellout then, won't it?
Yeah, we have your lot, Northampton, the next game. We've got them away, our first away game of the season. And then who have we got? We got Luton at home and Stockport away. I think that's what it is. And I can't remember if Stockport away is before you or after you. But
there's definitely 4 games before,
okay.
So because we've got 4 games before you, so that is a tough start, similar to Posh then as well. I know that we're obviously on telly, aren't we? Second game of the season. Yeah. So
it's certainly a welcome to League One. You look at it and think, tough start, Exeter away last day of the season, which is never a fun place to go. For us, biggest game of the season for us is Huddersfield, because Huddersfield are really our main rivals. And we haven't played them in the league since something like 2007, 2008, something crazy. And we played them at home in the middle of September. So that's a big one for us as well.
Nice and early on then as well, I suppose. So
there's a chance that we'll know by the time this gets published, but we're both in the north section of the League Cup as well this year.
What? Yeah, I think that's a weird. Like we're in the southern section for the Virtue Trophy Posh, and then the north section for the Carabao. So I mean, to be fair, I don't dislike that, because it does open up a whole host of new grounds and opportunities for Posh fans to go to. Whereas when you're in the southern draw, you kind of know that you've probably done the majority of them as somebody that's been to quite a lot of games. So you won't be here for the first round of the Carabao Cup either, I guess, potentially.
Unless we draw each other, then maybe I'll find a way to extend my trip for a few more days.
You could do it extend it for a whole month, right? Because I think that first game would be the 12th of August.
I think it's that week, isn't it? It's that week of the 11th or whatever it is. So just after we leave.
Good. Well, fingers crossed not for Bradford, because I like to play a League Two team in the first round of or at least a Championship team. Something that you're going to play at least twice. Ticking off them off for a third time is always a bit rubbish if you ask me.
Yeah, and we've not got a very good track record the last few years. in these. We usually end up playing Grimsby away or something like that, and having an early exit.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that the Carabao Cup's going to be a Hardtruth final, right? I think that might be a little bit of a stretch. I think that the Virtue is probably the focus on that.
We made it to the League Cup final back in, 2013?
Yes,
2012,
yeah, of course,
2012, 13 kind of time frame. So never say never.
Oh, I'm not for maybe for one of us, but probably not both of us.
No.
Probably a good time to talk about this man. Look, I keep getting my size wrong. Brandon Khela. Tell me about him straight off the bat. What are your thoughts on his move to Posh?
So I think it's a good move for him. I think it's a good move for Posh. We had him. I was looking before we came on. I think he was around for about 22 games. We signed him in January. We made quite a few signings on loan that were really the difference to push us to promotion last year. And when you make a lot of signings in the January window, you never really expect much to come off of them. And we were fortunate that pretty much every loan signing we brought in January really played a big role in promotion. And Brandon was one of those. He made a really good impression when he came. I don't think he'd had much experience before he came. He'd maybe played 5 or 6 games here and there. I think maybe he had a loan up to Scotland for a few games. We'd never heard of him, when he rocked up, but I was like, okay, let's see how he goes. And I think he just really impressed us. He's a funny one. I say a funny one because where I don't know how to pinpoint the impact he had in goal contributions. It wasn't direct assists. He wasn't scoring goals, but he was a kind of connector of the play, and did that quite effortlessly. So
you
he
can
made a
see
difference.
that, can't you? That he knows what he's doing, and that he's had that sort of like upper level academy sort of training from Birmingham, right? And he spent 13 years there, I think. Mm-hmm. And Bradford was probably the first. I know that you said he mentioned that he was in Scotland for a little bit, but Bradford was probably the first like proper go at football that he had for sort of a long period, right? So in terms of, I guess, like obviously the fan base, looking on Twitter, they're all gutted that he's sort of come to us, the Bradford fans. Is that something that you would say is the same for you?
I think that we would have definitely taken him back. I think that the squad that we're building at the moment is probably older and more experienced. We tend to be signing the 28 to 32-year-olds who have played in the Championship, who've played in League One, as a way to try and just build on that promotion and do that through experience. So yes, we'd have taken him back. I don't know if we'd have taken him back if he would have been a starter, but that's only because Graham Alexander, our manager, is favouring experience first. But we were, you can see that some loan players, you either they're here today, gone tomorrow, or there's the whole, never fall in love with a loan player. He's somebody that came in and really made a difference. He bought into the fabric of the club. I think you can see from all the goodwill that has come from City fans in him signing for Posh that except for against us, we want him to do well because he just seems like he's a good kid.
Yeah, and I think that that's similar sort of with Birmingham fans as well, isn't it? Is that although they know where their trajectory is, and probably Brandon Khela doesn't fit in, does he, to Birmingham's trajectory now? If they'd have maybe hung around in League One, I'm sure that he would have got game time, right? But he does seem just like a nice lad. I assume that you, with your off the field stuff, know that he's probably a nice guy as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's. I think he's very humble. He's one thing that I think that was obvious to us really relatively early in him playing is you can tell that he's been brought up in the same academy as the Bellinghams, and in that same kind of position. When Darragh was asking about him, that's one of the things I said is like he feels like he's got, from a positional perspective and from a grace kind of on the field. He feels in a very similar mold. Obviously, you can't compare hardly anybody to Jude Bellingham, but you can just see that he's got that upbringing and training, and that he is a similar kind of player, albeit at a lower level.
Just from looking at the highlight reels that Posh put together, like you say, the Bellinghams, like they carry themselves up, don't they? And they're looking ahead of the game, right? And that was one thing that I spoke to a Rangers podcast about Poku, is that Poku has the ability to carry the ball with his head up, and it looks like Khela is a similar sort of player in the sense that he doesn't need to worry about the ball at his feet because he knows where it is, and that he can then be looking ahead of the game and looking at where's he going to make the pass, where's he going to offload it, which I think probably is going to make him a great signing for Posh. So how do you think he sort of fits into Posh's system?
Well, I think he's a Kyprianou replacement. I think that he's the 8. He's the one that kind of gets up and down. He's the one that can move play pretty quickly. As you say, he's not afraid of the ball at his feet, at moving forward and putting it out left, putting it out right. I think that he's, he needs that kind of number 6 and a tough number 6 to back him up. He had Richie Smallwood at City. Richie Smallwood is not somebody who was particularly mobile, but was, a very, very good quarterback, and would kind of give him the space to go and do what he needs to do. So I definitely think he needs that, but that's what I see him. I see him in that kind of 8.
Do you think then that Archie Collins is the perfect partner for him? Because I would say that Archie Collins is aggressive as such, like those traditional 6s. But do you think that Archie Collins can offer the things that are maybe not Khela's strengths to assist him?
I don't know. And I say I don't know because, while obviously I observe kind of Archie Collins from a distance, I don't know the intricacies of his game particularly. So it wouldn't be fair to say yes or no. I think that, if Archie Collins can protect him, when he goes forward, be an outlet for him if he does run out of some space when he's going forward, I think that they would be a good pairing. But I probably don't know enough to say definitively.
Yeah, but he's somebody that is happy to go backwards as well, because obviously the way that we play and the way that Bradford plays is probably not quite the same, is it? Is that I think that maybe he's looking like he may be a better fit into our system than maybe a Bradford system, but he's still been great.
So I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, our system was, it's high press. It was kind of risk taking, but it was what we were playing. We were playing 3 at the back, wing backs. Couple of midfielders, 3 kind of behind the striker. I think he'll get more space playing in your system than he did at City. At City, you would get the 3 behind the striker that would always come back and kind of track back to get the ball as well. Yeah. So I think that might be why, his impact didn't show, in those goal contributions, because he was really just a conduit between midfield and that line of 3. Whereas you have those that are more kind of out wide, that he's going to be spraying it out, or he's going to be the one that's coming in to the edge of the area, waiting for things to drop on the edge of the 18-yard box. It wasn't so much when he played in our system.
Yeah. Well, I must admit that I am very excited by him. And off the bat, I feel, for me, obviously we mentioned Kyprianou, he's gone to Watford. Yeah. I feel like Khela's probably got the potential to be, in 2-3 years' time, I don't want to lump the pressure on early, in 2-3 years' time, be better than what Hector Kyprianou is when he left Posh. Do you think that that's something that you can see yourself as well?
Oh, 100%. I think he's a great Posh signing, because, if some of the signings that you make, you're bringing them out of non-league, and so they're needing that year or 2 to find their feet, and they may have the potential, but as we've seen this season with some of the players that came in that haven't really made the impact that was perhaps expected of them, and that they might need a little bit of time. I do think that Brandon can come in and make an impact straight away, so he's not going to have that learning curve that some that would come in from non-league may have. So I do think he can make an impact right away. And be a big part of it. But no, I think that he's got a very high ceiling. Yeah. So obviously for us, it was just, this is the start of his career, start of his professional career. He's playing men's football pretty much for the first time. But you can see that he's got a good head on his shoulders. He's got a good football brain. He's got the athleticism. So, get some good men's football and some, good kind of coaching in him. I would expect good things from him.
Yeah, and then so coaching, that does lead quite nicely on. Obviously, Fergie, we've got Scarfy, and now we've got Kevin Russell, the Rooster back. Obviously, those 3, we know what Rooster's done for Posh in times gone by, and he's also been working with Stokes under 23s, I think it is. Right. So I'm hoping that those 3 can offer that development plan. And I ultimately think that Fergie is one of the best in the business, right, in developing those 20 to 23-year-olds, and hopefully Brandon Khela is going to be the next one. I guess the question is what are the weaknesses to his game, and will Fergie be able to get those and train those and make them better?
I think that maybe he needs to get a bit stronger. That's just one thing that naturally comes from playing more in League Two, League One football than playing in age group football. I think that he can disappear at times when you don't have the momentum, and he wasn't somebody necessarily that tracked back and went and got the ball. But saying that, I was looking at all the games he played in for City. I think we only lost maybe 4 times in 22 games that he played for us. So it wasn't like he was in a team that had momentum, that was going well. And yes, we had a little stall towards the end of the season, but there was not really any rough patches per se. And a number of the games that we lost, he didn't play in.
Right. Okay.
So, he was especially earlier in his spell, because he didn't come straight into the team. When we signed him, it probably took him 5 or 6 games to get an appearance.
Right.
And we thought at first, is it just somebody here who's here to make up the numbers, to throw on as a sub when we need to,
a just in case player.
Yeah, exactly. But then once he got his chance, he kind of kept his place.
Yeah. So I get that. I guess I don't want to ask it because it seems like we're going into the season negatively, but it also doesn't sound like he was massively involved. Like, did you ever notice, like, when Bradford were down in games and losing, sort of what his reaction to that was?
No, but I would say that that's not a slight on him. That's more because, I'm watching from afar on TV, and you're only getting what you don't see is you don't see so much off the ball. Yeah. So I didn't really see how he played off the ball so much as, but I did go to a couple of games towards the end of the season that were live, and I didn't look at him and think that we're carrying him or anything like that. He was
I guess as well, that probably wasn't his role either, was it? In terms of, like, if it wasn't like, it's not his job to grab people by the scruff of the neck, right? Yeah. Is that he was on the pitch because your gaffer wanted him to do a particular role.
Yeah, he could make things happen.
The dirty stuff was done by those around him, right?
Yeah.
So,
and I think that where he was most ineffective is when he didn't have that midfielder by his side. So Richie Smallwood got suspended. Our number 6, our captain, for the last 3 games of the season. Brandon played, I think, in a couple of those, and he wasn't as effective in those. So that's why, I say he kind of needs that number 6 by him that can give him some protection. Yeah, and that may be just because it's, the first half season really playing professionally in men's football. That's just areas for him to develop, I would say.
Do you think as well that when he's looking at joining somebody like Posh, obviously, I think that it's commonly known that we weren't ultimately good enough last season, right? And that an 18th, 19th place finish for Posh is not good enough. Do you think that he saw that as an opportunity to come in and be like, right, okay, well, actually, I'm confident in himself as a player that he can make us better than we were last season? Do you think that there's an opportunity for that?
For sure. I mean, as an outsider, I think that the value proposition for a player signing for Posh doesn't change based on whether you finished 6th last season or 19th last season. Young players will make the decision, like Brandon, to come and play for Posh because you've got such a reputation for nurturing, growing, developing those players and helping them, to the next stage of their career. And hopefully, that everything kind of comes together at the same time where he enjoys that with Posh and you end up, back in the championship.
Fingers crossed.
I think that he'll have seen that if there's anywhere for him. I think this is what we talk about in the pod sometimes, and what I kind of hear about players who are interested in coming to Posh and those that aren't interested in coming to Posh. Those that are playing the long game with their career and realize that for them it's about coaching, development, opportunity, playing with other similar style people around them. You want that opportunity, then Posh is a great place to come. Those are a lot more focused on how can I get the biggest paycheck or I want to be a big fish, or that kind of thing. It's probably harder, and nor would I suggest that you want those kind of players and that they would fit into the culture that you have at Posh. I think that Brandon seems like what you were missing last year obviously was captains on the field. I feel that he's got that confidence in his game that I would imagine that he'd be pretty vocal. And I think that's something that you saw it when Sam Hughes came in and suddenly there was a little bit of leadership on the pitch.
Absolutely.
I think he missed that big time last season. And I would expect him to kind of step up a little bit into that kind of role.
Well, the man, I would always argue the man that he's replacing wasn't the leader that we needed last season in Hector Kyprianou, right?
And I agree with that, for a multitude of reasons that, he probably should have left a year sooner. And, and didn't bring what you needed to kind of a leadership role. And it is what it is, I think, in the way it all ended out. But I think that was a hindrance rather than a help.
Definitely. I think it was definitely Kyprianou's worst season for Posh. Yeah. So I think not that the bar is low, because look, Hector Kyprianou is still a great footballer, and I'm sure that he will go on to good things. But it maybe is an easier sort of gap to fill for Brandon in this sense, I guess.
Yeah. Then there's also there's a lot to be said for, do you want to be at the football club or not? In the terms of am I doing what I don't want to be harsh on Hector.
Phil, be my guest, because he was one of my least favourites last season because he didn't lead the team like I expected him to.
No, right? I felt like he was just waiting for his move.
Yeah.
And you bring somebody in, like a Brandon and some of the other, players that you're bringing in, they're here to forge their path for the next 4 years. I mean, Brandon's got a 4+1, I think, in terms of his contract.
Yeah.
So they have to make an impression, for their career to progress the way that they want to. And I think he's a confident kid in his own ability. Whereas Hector was probably just trying not to get hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. I do. And I would say probably similar with Poku and Ricky-Jade Jones towards the end of the season, is that they knew, and this sort of comes with, and I was at a sponsors event this morning with Ferg, and he sort of mentioned it, and I don't want to just blurt and misquote him, is that I don't think that the players realised that they were in a relegation battle, and he did openly admit that until it was the day before the Huddersfield game, I think it was, is that I think that they then sort of like snapped into it and went, actually, there's a real chance here, right, that we could get relegated. And that feeling was in the fans a lot earlier than that, but it wasn't in the players.
No, but then when you got the points, then the players seem like, they didn't carry it on, did they? It's like you got the points to feel comfortable. And I don't think you would say you went into the end of the season on a tear.
No, absolutely not. I mean,
you did enough. They felt they'd done enough, and then that was good enough again.
I think we did Stockport, Barnsley and Bolton were all 1-1 draws. Barnsley was the second one. We were safe after that.
Yeah.
And then Mansfield and Rotherham. Well, Mansfield was a disaster, but Rotherham wasn't too bad. I mean, we only lost 2-1, but that was the last game of the season, wasn't it? So, and equally, we were missing players like Mothersill Hughes and that sort of thing. But do you think, and I think that we can probably park Brandon Khela there. It would be nice to move on to some other things and ask you some other stuff about Posh and Bradford as well, is that you obviously, and I don't want you to say things that you can't say, which I'm sure that you won't, is that as an outsider and a Bradford fan, did you last season look at Posh and go, well, there's a very real chance that we might be playing them next season. It just might not be in League One, or we might miss them completely.
Yeah.
And we may be a roles reversed. Like, how did that look as an outsider?
I mean, I never thought you were going to get relegated.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we got relegated from League One to League Two with the highest budget we'd had in like 15 years.
Yeah.
And we finished bottom or second bottom. And so you're never too good to go down. And so, I felt the nerves for sure. And, as the defeats kept racking up, and as it felt like, some players' heads wasn't in the game, there was definitely the risk. I mean, if I was a Posh fan, first and foremost, I'd been worried.
Yeah.
But as an outsider, I felt that you had enough. You would, you just, there was enough smarts to scrap enough points to stay up, and you just needed that little bit of a run.
And I think I do agree with that, in that I think back, and we were discussing this week in the pod group, and that Bristol Rovers was probably rock bottom. We lost 3-1 on a Sunday afternoon.
I watched that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was on TV. And
Yeah.
I remember you guys recorded afterwards as well. I was shouting at
It was
players
horrible.
at
It's
half
like,
time. I was shouting at people after the match. And it, like, that felt like the base.
Yeah.
It then turns out that actually it was a whole nother month before they sort of realized that they were genuinely in a relegation scrap. And then, like you said, I always felt like I had the confidence that it's got to click at some point, right? Like they've got to come good. Like, these aren't bad footballers, as they're showing, because they're going to Watford. Ricky's gone to Germany, right? And Kwame looks like he's going to go to QPR potentially.
Yeah, Manny might go to Scotland, or
yeah, exactly that. Yeah, it's like they're good players and they're in demand as well. And it's like at some point it's got to click, and then it clicked, and then all of a sudden, as soon as they were safe, it was like, okay, foot off the gas completely. Which, like, it does make sense, because some of them knew that they were going to get moves, didn't they? Right? And
I mean, that Bristol Rovers game, though, you're watching that thinking, what happened?
Yeah.
What happened to the Posh of 12 months ago?
Yeah,
because it felt just like it didn't feel like a Peterborough United, of the last, certainly, as I've been following you a lot more closely the last 5 years or so, it felt like a completely different team.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that, in that even the likes of Sam Hughes that have been brought in, he wasn't able to sort of conjure up and get the other 10 players that he was on the pitch with to perform to a level that was required. And it was ultimately disappointing. And then I guess probably the next thing is that there's 3 more players, and I'm relatively sure that Darragh has learned, and we will not be making this mistake. And you can see it with the contracts.
Yeah.
We've got Malik Mothersill, Archie Collins, and Harley Mills.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? And do you think it's best that we sell them this summer if they say that they're not going to sign contracts?
Probably. I think that last year with Ricky, with Hector, with Kwame, that was you'd lost so many players that he didn't want to blow up the whole team. And so it was a bit of a calculated risk. And who really foresaw that you would have the injuries that you'd have, just the difficulties you had, and that you'd have the season that you did, because, hindsight's a wonderful thing. I don't think anybody really expected you did that. So I think that, you kept them all for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Obviously, it didn't work, and the amounts of money that will be lost because of it. I do think that if I think he will revert back to, without any insider knowledge of this at all.
Yeah,
I think that he will revert back to selling if he can get the price. If he can get an appropriate level of price. I mean, one thing I've learned is that Darragh knows how to play the market and how to get maximum, and he won't sell if the price isn't right. He'll take the risk if the price isn't right. And so I wouldn't say it's a hard and fast rule. The price has to be right, but I think there'll be more likelihood that you will sell than not.
Yeah, which I think, and we've discussed before, is the right thing to do, is that losing the 3 key assets of the team on free transfers this year has probably hurt us quite a lot, and we can't let it hurt us again in 12 months' time. So I would say if they're not going to sign, then I ultimately think that it's easier to bite the bullet and know that you've got 9 months to figure it out, rather than it get to January and sort of be scrapping around and then go, well, no, hang on a minute, we need to keep them. They're our 3 best players, which is probably where Posh were, I guess.
Yeah, and with Kwame's injury as well, that was really bad timing for his injury, so you couldn't really move him on in January if you wanted him to.
No, absolutely.
But the good thing is you've got all these assets. There's a lot of clubs that don't have these assets. You've got more assets in the youth team. With Harley coming up, Harley obviously looks like he's going to be in the next one on a production line, but he's only played 20 games for you, maybe 15 games for you.
Yeah.
And so, how much of a loss is it if he goes? Yes, that
is a difficult one, and
it's a blow because of what he can become.
Yeah.
But he's not had it's not like you're ripping out, like when Harrison left.
Yeah.
You're not leaving a Harrison-sized hole if Harley goes.
No, and ultimately he was playing in winning teams, right? Because he was playing in Virtue Trophy games, which we ultimately went on to win, and then he did it on the biggest stage of all. And that's the one thing with Harley Mills, is that he's never really had a chance to be bad, let's say, and ultimately, Hector had done got sent off in that Northampton game, and that then forced Fergie's hand to play Harley Mills in the league games because he was banned for 4 games. Is that actually has Harley Mills ever been given the chance to be bad and not bad, but like have poor performances? Let's say it's that actually Posh have only seen good performances. So although he may be here, actually because we've only seen good performances, everybody says, well, actually his performance level's here, right?
Yeah, it's a big decision, obviously, for him and his family, and they obviously believe they know what they're doing, and whatever happens with which direction it goes in. But I think he runs a risk of being the next one that's stuck in Norwich's under 23s, and never really making a career of it if he goes for the money and for a championship club or some academy, because he's got a really, really good chance to make that position his own next year and show what he can do. And if you do that for a year, let's say he's got a 3+1 contract, but you do that a year, the bids are going to come in. Yeah, and what Darragh and Peterborough have always shown is they're not going to stand in the way of players that have opportunities to better themselves, again, if the price is right.
Yeah, completely agree. I get one player that did move on to yourselves, Bradford. Yep. And it would be rude not to discuss this man because he came with a glowing reference from yourself, I believe, is Romoney Crichlow. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it didn't work out for him at Posh. He did look, let's just say, Romoney Crichlow makes fans more nervous than Nicholas Bilikapic does, I think, sometimes. What are your thoughts on him? And obviously now he's at Barnet, which is quite
I'm thrilled that he's got himself set up at Barnet. I think that maybe it was a jump too far for him coming to Posh, but also coming in as kind of Ronnie Edwards' replacement. So the high expectations off the bat of what the baseline is. A few tough games to start with probably really shattered his confidence. And at that point, you're in and out of the team. You never really get a chance to show yourself. Yeah. So I think that there was just a combination of there's probably a combination of all those things, coupled with when he played for us the first time, like what he was very comfortable on the ball. Yeah. He was pretty poor in the air. Yeah. And so, coming into Posh, you think, well, if he's going to be, a ball playing left-sided centre back, he should do okay there. Yeah. But he's not going to be the towering centre half that's going to be heading the balls, 20 yards out of the box or anything like that. Yeah. He was just never that kind of player. Obviously, it didn't work. And he ended up going to Dagenham, didn't he, on loan at the start of the season, where he did okay. And then joined us again in, I don't know if it was January or whether it was after the window closed.
It may have been, I think it may have been afterwards, We
were all really happy to get him back. Yeah. The first game that I saw him, I could see immediately that we've changed. So he may not have changed, but we've changed. And so our definition of good has changed. Yeah. And, because now he's around stronger players in a team that's, on form, that's going for promotion. Whereas, last time we kind of sneaked into the playoffs. Yeah. So we had a much stronger time this time around. I think that showed him probably to what his level was. A little bit more. He came in and he did okay in the first couple of games. It was really nice to see him back again. Really good kid, really buys into the club that he plays for. You want him to succeed. But it was no real surprise when we let him go. We had the option. We had an option on him. Yeah. And I think that if we hadn't have gone up, we'd have probably taken the option. Yeah. Right. But getting into League One, he's, I think that his time at Posh showed, and probably how he played when he came back to us showed that probably isn't a League One defender.
I guess as well for Bradford fans, it was a proper feel-good signing. Like they only knew a good Romoney Crichlow. Yeah. So it may be not even as a footballing decision, but it was a good business decision because it probably brought everybody closer together and helped push didn't it, into the right direction by bringing somebody back that was ultimately a fan favorite, right?
Yeah, he was well loved. He's somebody that has talked a lot about his love for the club the first time that he was with us, and I think that was mutual. So it was definitely a feel good kind of signing. And and one that wasn't particularly expensive
Yeah.
for us, and just a shame that it didn't work out.
No, I agree. So hopefully, fingers crossed that Brandon Khela is not Romoney Crichlow version 2, although I think that we're all confident here, right, in that he's probably a couple of levels ahead of where Romoney was when he
I
joined
think
us.
so. And maybe for me, this is why I come into League One a little bit blind, because it's been a few years since we've been in League One.
Yeah.
You don't really know what the difference in quality is until you start playing. And so it's harder to judge to say a League Two player will make the step up to League One. Romoney was somebody who's probably had more chances in his career and has been around a little bit longer. Brandon seems like he's somebody who is, it's just a development. It's that he has the upside is there. It's for him to step into. So I expect better things. I expect more success for Brandon than what Romoney had.
Good to hear. I guess, so for Bradford, what is a successful season for Bradford for next season, for you?
It's funny, when we talked about this on the pod at the end of the season, I was in my I'll just be happy if we survive mode.
Yeah, 20th is good enough.
Yeah, which, Darragh beat out to me pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Because he would never stand for that.
Yeah.
We've made some pretty good signings, I think, so far. That again, we're going for experienced players, played in the League One, had League One titles under their belt, played Championship. So we're definitely showing that there is money there to invest in the squad. That was my biggest fear, honestly, was will the owner make money available to have a go at it? And seemingly he is doing, and from what he said, in forums and things over the summer, it seems like they're putting whether it's a playoff size budget or an almost playoff size budget together. So I think that's probably the expectation is, why can't we challenge for the playoffs?
Yeah.
We may fall short, but I think it's more about, continuing to try and move upwards rather than just consolidating where we are.
Yeah, and ultimately, if you're aiming for the playoffs and fall short, then you know that you've given yourself, 14 positions difference?
Yeah.
If you're aiming to survive, you only give yourself 4 positions, don't you, to avoid, which should be the positive. Bradford should be in League One, shouldn't they, right? Bradford are not a League Two team, even though obviously the short-term history says that they are.
You are where you deserve to be. And, I think that we, as the collective Bradford fans, sometimes get a little carried away with, we're a bigger club, we've got all these fans and all those things. So at the end of the day, it's disrespectful to all the other clubs that have done so well to be in positions that they are. So
it's still 11v11 on the pitch, isn't it?
Yeah, but, having said that, you would think that from a size of the club perspective, we wouldn't be out of place in the Championship. I don't know if we've got the financial means, given the gap that continues to grow between the budgets and the Championship and budgets everywhere else. But I mean, we shouldn't be. League Two has been hard.
Of course,
It's been tough because we were in League Two for 6 years before, and we finally got out. We finally got on an upward trajectory, and we were kind of fighting with you in the playoffs for League One to try and get the Championship for a few years there. And then it all just went wrong. And so it's been pretty tough getting beaten every year by Harrogates of the world. And
Arrow.
and again, they deserve to beat us because they are where they deserve to be. That's more of a slight on us than it is being disrespectful to them, but it doesn't make it any easier.
No, of course. Do you know what? I've just thought of something on the spot, Phil, which is probably the last thing I want to cover, and it's because I can see your Bradford badge.
Yes.
Obviously, you guys had Chris Payne, didn't you, come in and do some designs, and I don't think it ended up being successful, that there was going to be a change, right? Have you seen the designs that Posh are potentially looking to put out?
I haven't.
You haven't? Okay,
I haven't seen them. I'm interested.
We can.
I
have.
Okay.
I can't say, obviously. I'm tied into an NDA. What I absolutely do not need is Darragh and Clive chasing after me.
Yeah.
I thought there may have been a chance that you'd seen it. So
no,
I guess the question, let's discuss why it didn't work for Bradford then, because I'm pretty sure that, we know that Posh are going ahead with it, right? 31st of July is the
Okay.
is the day that's going to be last. So that's 5 weeks today now, if
Mhm.
memory serves me correctly. Is that why did Bradford not go with Chris Payne's ideas, but maybe, and he's learned, and then ultimately is why Posh are going for his ideas?
Because we asked too many fans what their opinion was.
Yeah.
Is why I believe we didn't go forward. We made it,
Yeah.
you know, you can argue the merits of the designs that he came up with till the cows come home.
Yeah.
You know, some people like them, some people didn't like them. You're always going to have that debate. The problem that we had was, you know, you make it too much of a fan decision.
Yeah.
Fans are always going to stay with tradition.
Yeah, of course.
And when we made the final, so it was basically a vote of if we're going to go for it or we're not going to go for it.
Yeah.
But there were 3 choices that were given. And so that almost doomed people choosing the one of the 3, which was the brand new one.
Yeah.
From the start. So I honestly
think one of those 3 options was the current one, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like stay with the
Right.
current. Here's 2 new ones.
Yeah.
But what I knew would happen is, you know, if you got 50% of people, or even if you got 40% of people that like the new one, then you know you're going to split the rest of the vote between 2 others, which is going to reduce the chances of you voting for one of the new ones.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and I said this at the time, I think we should have been bolder in just going with it. Like all the reasons why we wanted to do a change were the same reasons at the end of the process than they were at the beginning of the process.
Yeah.
And you'll, again, never keep everybody happy.
No,
and so I think you either you do it because the reasons are right rather than this is the perfect design. Because people will get used to it, whether they like it or not.
Absolutely. And I know that come the 31st of July, there's going to be this design released, and I hope that I personally hope that everybody loves it, because I love it. I think it's great, right? But there's going to be 2 weeks of pain, I think, where there's why have you done this? Like, who signed off on this? And
looks like a kid's drawn this and blah, blah,
yeah,
blah.
no
blah,
doubt
blah.
you'll be recording probably the Friday morning to get something out in the afternoon so that Darragh can get his opinion out. But ultimately, like he said, is that he loved it, right? And I'm pretty sure that he said that he wanted it done straight away. So I think there has to be an element of trust, doesn't there, with the people that have made the decisions. And as fans, the opportunity was there to see it, right? Even though it was a select group, everybody had the chance to be part of those groups, didn't they? So maybe not on the volume. And there's 100,000 fans on Posh's database, I think it is. You can't ask them all, can you?
I also hate to say it, but at the end of the day, we're customers of a business. And I hesitate saying that because obviously we feel like our connection is greater, and the relationship that fans have with their clubs requires that relationship to be stronger than it just, you know, customers of a business. But you know, if Tesco changed their logo, you might think, well, what they're doing, and you'd be fine. You'll still keep shopping there. So I do think sometimes, you know, decisions just need to be made, yes, in some consultation, but you're not going for groupthink or you know, majority acceptance, and that's really what we did.
And I think that ultimately there is a lack of understanding, and this is where I've discussed with Clive and Chris before, is that there are processes that have to be followed, like that protect football clubs from somebody just coming in and saying, right, well, I'm changing your badge, right? Like, it's done. Whatever's happening's happening. I know that there's been lots of sort of back and forths of, well, should there be this? Should there be a vote on it? But ultimately, like you guys know, is that if you offer the current badge as an option, then it's always going to be a favourable vote to the current one, because humans don't like change, do they?
No, and you know what it did is it set us back for years, because we're not going to be broaching this topic again. I mean, I think this was now probably 2 or 3 years ago, and we're probably, even though it's still the right thing to do for all the reasons why it was the right thing to do 3 years ago, we're probably not going to dare come forward and have this conversation for a few more years again.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think that's everything from me, Phil. Is there anything you would like to say that's off the cuff?
No, it's just been a pleasure to chat. You know,
thank you very much for giving up 45 minutes of your Thursday afternoon. It's much appreciated.
Not a problem. No, always happy to chat, and it's been I enjoyed myself. So thank you.
Maybe we might have to invite you back on after Posh have got 3
Yeah.
points in
Well,
August.
we'll see what the result is first.
I won't email you or drop you a text at what 5 o'clock on Saturday the 23rd after Posh have just hopefully won 5-0 and you're stomping around a room somewhere.
Yeah, I probably still got my head in my hands, in London Road somewhere if I manage to make it.
Yeah, fingers crossed you do, because it would be
Or
great
I'll be the one that cheers in the home end.
Yes, that was one thing I was going to mention earlier on, is that you'll be able to cheer a goal that's not a Posh goal, right? And that will probably be weird, but it will be a great experience for you as well to have that safety net in the director's box of not having people like me jumping at your throat, right?
Yeah,
ripping up their program to start throwing it towards you and things like that.
No, always be respectful of your hosts. I've learned that, I've been in the home end a number of times for a lot of games, and it's been very hard to sit on my hands, when we've scored. But no, you got to do what you can do to be respectful.
Well, Phil, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the pod, but we always sign off with an Up the Poshcast. So I'm going to drop mine first, and then if you would I'd love it if you could, just so that we've got it there, and then part of the thing, because I think that we're probably going to drop this as an extra episode, because we can go for 45. So thank you very much, Phil, again for your time. Hopefully we can do this again. Up the Poshcast.
Up the Poshcast.
Thank you all for listening. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at UpThePoshcast. Let us know your feedback. Give us any ideas for topics you would like to discuss or any questions you'd like us to answer. Up the Poshcast.